Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the steam and shadow of a city that never truly sleeps, where minarets pierce the sky and the scent of cardamom clings to every stone wall. You're not a sultan, not a janissary, not even a merchant. You're something far more critical to Ottoman survival, a humble coffee vendor in 16th century Constantinople, a city buzzing with politics, poetry, and a whole lot of caffeinated opinions. You'll wake up long before the city does, because your day starts when even the street cats are still negotiating their dreams. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this without a mild back injury and at least one sarcastic argument with a regular customer who thinks he knows how to stir foam better than you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and the current time in the comments. I'd love to see who's tuning in around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You jolt awake in a room that's barely bigger than a janissary's temper. The air is still thick with the smell of yesterday's roasted beans and a faint trace of last night's incense. Outside your shuttered window, Constantinople exhales slowly, only the distant shuffle of sandals and the first, almost reluctant caw of gulls mark the hour. It's pre-dawn, that magical hour when everything feels like a secret. You roll out from under a woven blanket that's seen better dynasties and stretch until your spine makes a sound not unlike a distant zurna. In the corner, your brazier, your best friend and worst enemy, sits cold and judgmental, waiting to be coaxed back to life. You start with your hands. They move automatically, grinding the beans in your mortar with slow, circular motions. It's a mix of Arabica from Yemen and a few precious scoops of beans smuggled in from Ethiopia, your special blend. Historians still argue whether coffee first took hold in Sufi monasteries or among Ethiopian goat herds, but one thing's certain, this stuff is sacred to your regulars. The first whiff hits you like a memory, deep, earthy, slightly bitter. You smile. No matter how stiff your knees are, that scent still feels like a promise. Your hands are quick but quiet. Your landlord lives upstairs, and the last thing you need is a broomstick warning thumped on the ceiling. You spoon the powdered treasure into a small sack, tie it tight, and tuck it into the fold of your sash. Out on the street, the stones are cool under your sandals, and your breath ghosts in front of you. A few early birds, the kind who probably haven't slept, nod at you. One even mutters, "You're late," though it's clearly a joke. Barely. The mosque down the street comes to life with the first eazan, and your stomach tightens, not from fear, but anticipation. In the silence that follows the call, you light your brazier with practiced care. No matches, no flick-click lighters, just flint, steel, and enough cursing under your breath to qualify as a separate language. You blow gently, encouraging the coals, feeding them with thin slivers of olive wood. Flames rise, golden and loyal. You set your kettle, bronze and blackened, over the flame, and it hisses as the water inside begins to heat. Your hands dance now, muscle memory taking over. You lay out your sezes, long-handled brass pots shaped like truncated cones. You line up your cups, small porcelain thimbles you bartered for in a moment of madness from a Greek sailor who said they were almost symmetrical. They're not, but you pretend not to notice. There's a trick to the foam. It's not boiling, you know better than to let it bubble like soup. No, it's a gentle coaxing, a quiet rise of thick, dark gold that must be caught just before the edge. Coffee without foam is like a calligrapher with no ink, pointless, sad, and mildly insulting to everyone involved. As the first pot warms, your eyes drift to the rooftops. Cats are starting to stretch, claiming territory like tiny landlords. A stray janissary patrol shuffles past, barely glancing at you. You nod, respectfully. No reason to antagonize men with swords and questionable senses of humor. By now, the air around you smells like a dream someone tried to bottle: coffee, smoke, a hint of sugar, and the ghost of yesterday's rosewater. And just like that, the city stirs. You hear it before you see it, the creak of shutters, the soft slap of slippers against tile, the murmur of water being drawn. It's like watching the tide come in, only it smells like cardamom and worry. The first customer doesn't even say hello. He's a poet, or so he claims, and he likes to drink in silence. You hand him a cup with just the right amount of foam, and he slips you a coin, more than you expected. Maybe the muse was kind last night. By the time the sun kisses the edge of the rooftops, you've already served a scholar, a spice trader, and one woman in a veil who asks if you have something stronger. You offer her the Yemeni blend. She nods, sips, and disappears without another word. Fun fact, some Ottoman cities tried to ban coffee entirely, claiming it made people rebellious and gossipy. Historians still argue whether those bans were really about piety or just control. Either way, you're grateful no one's yanked your says yet. You glance down the street. The real rush is coming. You tighten your sash, adjust your cups, and check the flame. This day has just begun. And already, you can smell the politics brewing behind every single sip. The sky begins to shift, bleeding from navy to a honeyed, peachy blur. You don't really look up, you don't have the time, but the color change paints the brass rims of your cups with soft reflections, and that's enough to feel it. Dawn is no longer arriving. It's here! Which means it's time for fire, spice, and boiling bronze. You reach for your says, the small, hourglass pot with its long wooden handle, and dip it into a battered water jug. It's not just any water, you collected it from a cistern early yesterday. Rainwater, technically. Purified through layers of gravel and charcoal, if the seller is to be believed. One customer claims he can taste the difference. You're not so sure. The first round is for those who want it plain and sharp. No sugar, no spice, just roasted defiance. You spoon in your precious grind, darker than the Sultan's secrets, and stir. The surface dances with faint bubbles. You don't blink. The sez sits directly on the embers, and you gently rake the coals to cradle it just right. Too much heat, and the foam dies. Too little, and you'll be here until the next Sultan ascends. You add cardamom to the next batch, just a hint. Some customers want more. One insists you add clove and a drop of rose essence, and while you do it, he always watches like he's protecting a recipe that dates back to Saladin. You never ask. Some recipes carry more baggage than caravans. And then, the sez whispers. The mixture inside breathes upward, a dome of foam rising like a well-trained acrobat just before the fall. You snatch it from the flame and pour slowly, letting the froth settle like a cloud in a painted sky. Your hands are fast, and your eyes faster. You prep 4, 5, sometimes 6 sezes at a time, arranging them like a general lining up for battle. Your customers form an invisible queue, no signs, no ropes, just a hierarchy understood through glares and eyebrow twitches. One man steps forward, smirks, and says, "Extra strong, like my mother-in-law." You chuckle, pour, and wonder if he'll ever say it while she's present. As the smells thicken, so does the air around your stall. The copper warms your fingers, and the heat starts to climb up your sleeves, crawling into your bones. In summer, it's murder. In winter, it's survival. Spring mornings like this are tricksters, cool enough to deceive, hot enough to blister. And here's your fringe fact of the morning. Some Ottoman men believed that drinking thick coffee could cure melancholy. Not just lift your mood, cure it. Historians still argue whether these claims were sincere medical beliefs or just clever excuses for avoiding their wives and hiding in coffeehouses all day. In any case, your corner begins to buzz. A trio of scribes claim a low stone ledge nearby, cups in hand, parchment peeking from their satchels. One quotes Rumi. Another pretends to listen while scribbling in the margin of a tax record. A third is probably just here to eavesdrop. You pour another round. Some people stay for one. Others nurse their tiny porcelain cups like they're keys to a better afterlife. You're careful with those people. They tip well, but they also remember everything you say and exactly how long it took you to serve them. Behind you, the embers spit. The wind shifts. You turn your head just enough to catch the scent of something else. Baking bread, maybe, or the meat vendor 2 stalls over finally roasting those skewers he's always bragging about. Your stomach grumbles, and you mutter something unkind in the general direction of food you can't afford until later. Your says hisses. You're back in it. There's something poetic about your tools. The long-handled ladle, the half-broken spice box with cinnamon dust in its corners, the rows of slightly chipped cups each with a story you've already forgotten. You tried once to polish your says every morning, but that lasted about 3 days. Now, you claim the stains add flavor and historical authenticity. Another customer leans in. A merchant with rings on every finger and a voice like gravel. He orders 2, one sweet, one bitter. For clients, he says. You prepare them, switching up your says mid-pour like a sleight-of-hand magician. He nods in approval, flicks a coin your way, and vanishes into the crowd. The early shift is your favorite, even if it robs you of sleep. These are your steady patrons, thinkers, tinkerers, and the occasional low-level vizier who likes to slum it for the gossip. They're the kind who believe your brew is more accurate than a town crier and more reliable than most imams. You're not flattered, exactly. But it does make the morning pass faster. Here's the tricky part, each says needs you. You can't set and forget. You hover. You coax. You listen for that micro hiss, that miniature gurgle that says, now. Pour now, or lose the foam. It's like being a fortune teller whose cards are hot metal and ground beans. You glance up. The sun's cracked fully over the domes now, and it's painting the rooftops in bronze. Your stall catches a bit of it, warming your knees. A breeze snakes through the alley, stealing a puff of steam from your latest pour. You smile, even if no one sees it. One last order before the proper chaos begins. A cup for an old man with a cane who walks like history itself is lodged in his spine. He nods slowly as you hand it over and whispers, still better than that other guy's stuff. You don't ask who that other guy is. You already know. And he's about to arrive. But that's for later. For now, you stir, pour, rinse, and repeat. Bronze clinks. Foam dances. And the fire beneath your says glows like it knows secrets you haven't told anyone yet. He arrives exactly when you expect him, after the second call to prayer, when the city is fully awake and the air shifts from meditative to mildly chaotic. He doesn't speak at first. He never does. He just stands there at the edge of your view, adjusting the silk sash on his coat like he's preparing for a duel instead of a caffeine fix. The scholar-poet. Or the poet-scholar. Depends on the day. Today he looks like he might be both, and possibly also broke, which is fine. You've long since accepted that your best customers pay in stories, not silver. He saunters forward, cup already in hand, like it's a ritual choreographed centuries ago. You know what he wants. Dark. No sugar. Foam to the brim. Served with just enough eye contact to suggest that you understand the ache of ideas gnawing at the soul before sunrise. You pour without a word. He nods, sips, and mutters something about the tyranny of wakefulness. You nod solemnly. He always says that. Every time. And he's not alone. The regulars are rolling and now. Here comes the chess man with no actual board. He just sits and argues theoretical openings with strangers who didn't ask. There's the perfume seller who smells like every flower in the known world and still somehow manages to offend the dervishes when she speaks. And let's not forget the whispering pair, two young men who pretend to be interested in Sufi metaphysics but are clearly more interested in each other. They all come here, to your crooked little corner cafe that isn't even a cafe. It's technically just a brazier and 3 crates, but in the Ottoman world, that's practically a licensed franchise. And the best part? The schemers. Every city has them, the soft-spoken, well-dressed men who seem to drink coffee with one hand and rearrange alliances with the other. They never say what they do. They tip generously. They linger just long enough to finish a cup and leave right before things get interesting. One of them, today, at least, is a man in a dark kaftan with a scar near his ear. He takes his cup and sits under your awning, legs crossed, eyes sharp. He says he's a translator. You suspect he's at least 3 other things. Fun fringe fact? Ottoman coffeehouses were banned and re-legalized more times than cats have lives. Some sultans believed they were dens of sedition. Others considered them essential to civil discourse. Historians still argue whether the bans were genuine moral concerns or just economic power plays over who controlled the bean supply. But you're just trying to keep the foam from collapsing. Your says are working overtime. A slight panic builds. 3 are bubbling at once, and someone wants his with ginger, of all things. You nod, stall, and hope the others don't burn. It's coffee triage. You're the surgeon. The poet finishes and drifts toward the scribes. They part for him like waves before a shipwreck. He sits, talks, laughs once. You can't hear the joke, but it makes the tax clerk next to him choke on his sip. A cup crashes. Not yours. One of your customers drops it, young, nervous, wearing a robe too rich for this alley. You raise a brow. He apologizes profusely, and someone else pays for him before he can open his coin pouch. Another quiet rule of your space: shame doesn't linger, and generosity shows up uninvited. And just when things feel settled, you spot him. The rival. He's on the opposite corner, 2 alleys down, but the smell of his roast still finds you. It's a cleaner setup, table, stool, embroidered cloth, cups so new they practically wink. He's smiling too much. That's suspicious. You focus. There's enough coffee thirst in this city for both of you. Still, the way he flicks his says then glances your way with mock surprise when customers glance at his stall? That's war. The polite kind. The one fought with phone height, spice balance, and charisma. You watch as one of your own regulars detours to his corner. Trader? Tourist? Hard to say. You tell yourself it's fine, but your pour gets a little more aggressive. A man in a turban orders two, no sugar, one with clove. You nod, already moving. Your hands are steady even as your eyes wander. The rival says flares. He's using hotter coals, maybe even charcoal. Risky. Flashy. Flashy can impress crowds. Or ruin foam. Your scholar poet notices too. He leans over to you on his second cup, whispers, "That boy says sings too loudly." You grin. It's not a compliment. Back at your stall, a woman with ink-stained fingers argues with a merchant about Persian grammar. You serve them both without taking sides. It's not worth the risk. Grammar debates are bloodsport here. Your brazier flares unexpectedly, and you lunge just in time to save a nearly foamed cup. Close call. You mutter a prayer and a curse, possibly in the same breath. You look up. Scarman is gone. So are 2 cups. You're short 1 coin. You don't chase. If he was who you think he is, chasing him would be a very poor idea. Instead, you focus on the fire, on the sound of boiling bronze, on the rise and fall of foam and conversation. You're not just making drinks. You're holding court, hosting confessionals, stoking revolutions, one slightly chipped porcelain cup at a time. The sun has climbed higher now, warm enough to make your brow damp, but not yet oppressive. The market hums at full volume, a chorus of clanking copper, flapping fabric, haggling voices, and the low rumble of cartwheels grinding over uneven stones. Your little corner is just one node in a vast, living network, and your job is about to get even messier. You pack up your sezes, 5 today, and tuck them into a satchel that clanks with spoons, jars, and a small tin of dried orange peel, which you rarely use but like to show off when the mood's right. You cover the embers of your brazier, lift the whole thing with a grunt, yes, your knees complain, and start your march through the market. It's not far, just across the way toward the Grand Bazaar's edge, but the foot traffic alone makes it feel like crossing oceans. You maneuver around sheep who have no business being this close to the olive merchant, dodge a flying sandal, don't ask, and get heckled by the melon vendor who insists you owe him for last week's excellent gossip. You don't. The market is more than commerce, it's theater. Spices spill like colored sand over wide trays. Silks ripple in impossible patterns, lifted by breezes that seem summoned purely for effect. And through it all, you smell coffee. Yours, of course, but also others. There's old Mustafa's stall, barely a brazier and a half, with beans roasted into ash but still beloved by the oldest men in the district because he tells them they look less dead every morning. There's Naylin, the widow who works 3 burners and never spills a drop. You suspect she once ran a palace kitchen. You also suspect she'd beat you in a foam-off blindfolded. But more importantly, you sense the politics. Coffee here is more than taste, it's territory. You're crossing lines, literally and socially. You set up just outside the spice row, close enough to catch those weary from chilly fumes, but not so close that the cinnamon merchants glare at you. And you start again, brazier lit, says arranged, cups unwrapped like small treasures. The customers shift. These aren't your alley regulars. These are market folk, sharp-tongued, silver-minded, and rarely interested in your opinions. They want fast, hot, and cheap. One woman insists her husband can taste overboiled beans from a single whiff. You nod politely and give her the fresh batch. She doesn't tip. Still, there's volume. And volume means coin. You overhear snippets of everything, dowry debates, inventory rants, even one heated conversation about whether coffee robs men of their strength. That one ends when a cloth vendor slaps the table and declares, "If strength lies in silence, my husband is a lion." Historians still argue whether coffee really was seen as a dangerous stimulant or just a scapegoat for society's sudden awakening. One mufti in Cairo banned it. Another praised it. Your view? Anyone who bans coffee probably just brewed it wrong. You serve a scribe who always wants his grounds left in the bottom, for omens, he says, and a tax agent who doesn't smile but always comes back. One man buys 3 cups and balances them on a tray like he's part of an Ottoman circus act. You consider hiring him. And then, just as you're pouring a particularly delicate foam swirl, a voice behind you hisses, "Watch the taxman today." You don't turn. You recognize the voice. It belongs to a boy who runs messages for a local spice dealer but always knows things he shouldn't. You give him a date from your pouch. He grins and vanishes. This is the other layer of the market, rumor. The coffee bans may have lifted, but suspicion lingers like cardamom in your sleeves. Licenses, permits, bribes, you walk a tightrope over smoldering law, and today the rope feels frayed. You pour slower, cleaner. You wipe the rim of every cup like it's going to a palace banquet. You nod extra politely to anyone in a turban even slightly too large. And while you're pretending not to notice, you hear them. The rival's voice. Louder now. Closer. He's migrated, set up at the edge of your zone, no doubt emboldened by some customer praise or sheer ego. His brazier sings like it's auditioning for the Janissary band. And his laugh, that laugh, cracks through the bazaar like badly tuned cymbals. He's serving a group of scribes, and they're raving. So light, so smooth, and that touch of cinnamon, brilliant. You breathe. You serve. You don't look, because your customers are still here. Still lining up. Still slapping coins on the edge of your crate table and saying the usual. Because in a world this loud, familiarity whispers louder than flair. Also, he's going to overfoam at least one says before noon. You just know it. A fringe bit of trivia you share under your breath while rinsing your pot. In some parts of the empire, people believed fortune-telling from coffee grounds was sorcery. Others considered it just an eccentric afternoon ritual. You don't read grounds, but your old aunt does. Once, she stared at a cup and told a man he'd be married in 3 days. He ran out of town. You're not sure which part scared him more. You serve until your fingers cramp. Until the coals start to cool and the foot traffic shifts toward lunch. And as the market winds down, just a little, just enough for the smells to settle and the voices to blur into a pleasant hum, you start packing your says again, dusting off crumbs and sighing at your soot-stained sleeves. One last glance at your rival. He's wiping his brow, serving with flair, and you swear his foam just collapsed. You smile. Market politics? Survived. Now, back to your alley, your regulars, and hopefully, your seat that doesn't wobble quite as much as your knees. By the time you make it back to your original corner, the sun is high enough to cook lentils on your scalp. The stone underfoot is warm now, one of those subtle market details that tells time better than any muezzin. You lower your brazier with a sigh that says I'm not as young as I think I am, and immediately start reorganizing your tools like a general returning to camp after a tense border negotiation. But you're not alone anymore. There he is, your rival. He's already set up, his brazier barely 3 paces from yours, tucked beneath a crooked awning with just enough shade to imply smugness. His says gleam like they've been polished with celestial dust, his cups stacked in neat pyramids like little monuments to vanity. And then he does it. The eyebrow. He arches it in your direction, subtle, almost respectful, but with just enough lift to whisper, "I'm winning today, old man." You do not return the gesture. Instead, you reach for your jar of cloves and give it a shake. The tiny clank echoes like a challenge. The next hour is a war. A war of aromas, of foam, of customer charm. Your regulars stand by you, loyal as ever, though one does sneak a second cup from his stall and tries to hide the evidence behind a fig. He catches you watching and offers a sheepish shrug. You nod. Traders get no foam. The rival's crowd is flashier. Younger. One of them performs an impromptu poem about cinnamon. Another asks for foam art, whatever that means. He obliges with a swirl and a wink. You nearly trip over your own ladle. But here's the thing, his seive is too hot. You know the signs. The way the bubbles raise instead of rise. The faint hiss before the collapse. You time it. You wait. Then, like a thunderclap in miniature, one of his seives overboils. A tragic splatter of foam and grounds hits his brazier, and a small gasp ripples through the crowd like wind across a tiled dome. You pretend not to notice. Except you definitely do. And so does your scholar-poet, who sips dramatically and murmurs, "Style is nothing without restraint." You serve another round, smooth, balanced, foamed like a dream you'd marry if dreams had dowries. And then your corner shifts again. 2 Janissaries appear, cutting through the crowd like a hot knife through hummus. Their boots slap the ground and sink, and their faces are unreadable under layers of mustache and indifference. One of them points at your rival's brazier. Too close to the prayer space, he mutters. The rival stammers, adjusts his table, tries to smile. It doesn't work. You offer them each a free cup before they even ask. It's a gamble. Janissaries can be brutes. Or saints. Or both before breakfast. But coffee, when served well, has a funny way of softening the hard edges of men paid to break bones. One of them takes a sip, sighs, and mutters, "Reminds me of Damascus." You have never been to Damascus. You nod as if you were born there. They leave, satisfied. Your rival, not so much. To his credit, he doesn't glare. He just adjusts his says, lowers his flame, and goes quieter. A tactical retreat. You respect it. And now, the air cools slightly. A breeze slinks through the alley, nudging your awning like a lazy cat. The regulars return. The poet begins quoting Persian verse. Someone mentions Layla and Majnun and gets shushed. The grammar argument restarts, louder. You're back in your rhythm. A fringe tidbit floats across your memory. Some Ottoman coffee vendors used secret spice blends they never revealed, even to their own sons. Historians still argue whether this secrecy was culinary pride or sheer paranoia. You suspect both. Your aunt once bit a neighbor for asking if she added nutmeg. You believe she still would. You ladle out another round. You wipe a spoon. You let the says breathe. And that's when you spot him. A boy. Not more than 10. Wide eyes. Empty hands. Bare feet. He watches you like you're casting spells. You nod at him, subtly. You pour a short cup, lighter, no sugar, and slide it his way. He hesitates, then takes it with both hands like it's a holy relic. He runs. Doesn't even sip it here. Just cradles it like something warm in a cold world. You say nothing. The poet watches and nods. The rival sees it too. He smiles, a real one this time, and raises a cup in salute. You raise yours back. The war isn't over. But for now, there's peace. And besides, your foam held better. You settle deeper into your wooden stool, which creaks in protest like an old friend who's heard too many of your complaints but still makes room. The rival has wandered off for now, leaving his brazier under the watchful eye of a sullen apprentice who looks like he'd rather be herding goats. The rhythm shifts again, not slower, just deeper. You're not just serving coffee anymore. You're holding court. Your stall has become a micro-empire. It's remarkable, really, what a little heat, a few beans, and the ability to pour without spilling can do for your status. You don't wear official robes. You don't carry a seal. But right here, right now, you're the sultan of the alley. And your throne? A crate with one leg shorter than the others and a faded cushion that smells like cumin. Across from you, the scholar poet is still holding forth. He's halfway through a story about a librarian who memorized an entire book of medicinal plants but died of food poisoning. He never trusted cooks, he adds, shaking his head. Tragic irony. You nod. At the next crate table, a pair of traders are playing backgammon with pieces that don't match. One of them swears he's seen a lion in the forests near Bursa. The other insists it was just a fat dog. This argument will last all week. Near your brazier, a student is reciting verses to impress a girl who is very clearly not impressed. You refill her cup. She winks at you. He doesn't notice. And in the far corner, the dervishes appear. You hear them before you see them, soft chanting, rhythmic taps of staff to stone, and the unmistakable rustle of robes that have wandered through more dust than most caravans. They come in twos or threes, never more, and never with warning. Today, it's 4. Their faces are weathered but not tired, framed by beards that seem to hold their own opinions. One of them carries a stringed instrument. Another smells faintly of frankincense and cloves. They settle without speaking, forming a loose circle just off to the side of your brazier. You know what to do. You pour. No sugar. No spice. Just pure, strong, dark as midnight coffee, served in plain cups. They don't tip. They don't need to. Their presence is payment in social currency. People edge closer. Conversations soften. Even the poet quiets. The air feels different. Not reverent exactly, but thick with anticipation. One dervish begins to hum. Another taps a bowl with his spoon, creating a rhythm that syncs perfectly with the crackle of your brazier. And then, as if summoned by the moment itself, someone starts whispering. You don't catch every word, but the phrases float like smoke. Palace, missing page, astronomer's map, moon eclipse. It's gossip, sure, but the kind of gossip wrapped in riddles and dipped in honey. The kind people pay for with silence and side eyes. Fringe tidbit of the day: it's widely believed that some coffeehouses doubled as underground schools, where philosophy, astronomy, and forbidden texts passed hand to hand under the veil of casual cups. Historians still argue whether these were organized movements or just bored scholars with too much caffeine. Either way, you've seen more knowledge exchanged here than in some madrasas. You pour another round, letting your says hiss a little for effect. The poet leans toward the dervishes. He asks a question about the rotation of stars and whether time itself can bend. One dervish chuckles and answers with a proverb so layered that half the crowd pauses to figure out if it's an insult or a compliment. The backgammon game stops. The girl finally looks interested. The student stammers. You refill your cups, nodding to each newcomer as if they've arrived by invitation. Which, in a way, they have. Your stall isn't just a stall anymore, it's become an agora, a court of curiosities, a whispered parliament of caffeine-fueled minds. But empires have rules. You don't allow shouting. You don't allow wine. You don't allow anyone to insult the foam. That last one is enforced with particular severity. One man once said your coffee was too frothy. He now drinks with the rival. Poor soul. The dervishes begin to rise. One finishes his last sip, sets the cup down with precision, and whispers something you only half hear: "Watch the moon tonight." You want to ask why. You don't. With mystics, silence is sometimes the correct answer. They vanish into the market flow like ink in water. And just like that, the spell breaks. The conversations return. The student resumes his poetry, this time more confident. The poet raises his cup in your direction and says, "This place smells like thinking." You reply, and sometimes burning toast. Another laugh. Another round. Another pot poured. You glance at the sky, midday approaches. The light sharpens, cutting down the alley like a blade. You adjust your awning, pull your braziers slightly to the right, and keep going. Because this stall? It's not just your job. It's your republic. Your archive. Your slightly singed living room. And for now, business is very, very good. Just when you think the day might ease into predictable chatter and well-measured pours, the city throws you a curveball wrapped in wool robes and sandal dust. A new group drifts into your corner, a quiet procession, 5 deep, moving like windless prayer flags. They don't announce themselves, but they don't need to. You've seen their kind before. Dervishes, yes, but not like the ones from earlier. These men are from the outskirts, maybe Konya or even deeper into the eastern provinces, judging by the faded blues of their cloaks and the particular way their hands are stained with ink and clay. You catch the scent of rose oil, leather, and dust, desert dust, the kind that clings like memory. They don't sit at once. They hover, as if waiting for permission from the air itself. One finally steps forward. He's older than the rest, with eyes that look past your stall and into some other time entirely. He says only, 5. Strong. You nod. No sugar. No cardamom. Just pure, robust, burn-your-tongue boldness. You work fast but not rushed, and something about the way you stir the says feels ceremonial now. You adjust your coals, careful not to let the flame rise too fast. Foam this time must be perfect, calm, rising slow like breath in stillness. While they wait, they begin to chant. It's not loud. In fact, the sound barely registers over the buzz of the market. But something about it hums in your chest. Low, rhythmic, a repetition of syllables that could be names, or prayers, or both. People stop talking. Not all of them, this is still Constantinople, after all, but enough for the change to be felt. One man whispers, "Are they here about the missing book?" Another says, No, it's about the comet." A third insists they're spies dressed as mystics. You don't comment. You're too focused on the pour. You set the cups down in front of them, one by one. No fanfare. Just heat, foam, and stillness. They sip in silence. The market starts to breathe again, cautiously, like it's afraid to interrupt. Then the younger one speaks. "Did you hear about the fountain?" You blink. He's looking at you. You shrug. You've heard about 100 fountains. He smiles faintly. The one under the treasury. The one that wasn't supposed to exist. Now you're listening. Another dervish leans forward. They say it's real. And there's writing along the walls, writing no one can read. Whispers ripple out from the stall like spilled ink. You've heard tales like this before, hidden fountains, secret vaults, relics buried beneath mosques and hammams. Some stories are old. Others are inventions of bored scholars and playful beggars. But these men speak with the calm certainty of those who don't care if you believe them, because they know. Fringe historical note: rumors of secret chambers beneath Topkapi Palace have existed for centuries. Some claimed entire scroll libraries were hidden during periods of political purge. Historians still argue whether these were exaggerated or real attempts to protect knowledge from fires, floods, or inconvenient truths. Back at your stall, the chanting resumes, just for a moment, then stops. One of the dervishes stands and drops something into your cup stack. Not a coin. A small piece of polished stone, engraved with a symbol you don't recognize. He doesn't explain. He just walks away. The others follow, disappearing down a side alley like a dream you forgot mid-sentence. You pick up the stone. It's smooth, cool, heavier than it should be for its size. The engraving is precise, 3 circles and a crescent. You consider asking the poet, but he's deep in conversation about tulip inflation with a merchant who doesn't believe in flowers. Instead, you pocket it. Just as you're about to return to your seize, a woman approaches. Veiled, quiet, eyes sharp. She points at the departing mystics and says, "Did they speak to you?" You hesitate. Then nod. She presses a folded scrap of parchment into your hand. "When the moon rises, read this," she whispers. Then she vanishes as well. Okay, now this is getting weird, even by Ottoman coffee stall standards. You stash the note. You finish the next pour. You hand a cup to the backgammon men, who've moved on from lions to whether the Grand Vizier has a secret twin. It's a good distraction. But you can't stop glancing at the parchment. The poet notices. He raises an eyebrow. "Palace matters," he says with mock concern. You shrug. "Just say the word if you need backup," he adds, tapping his walking stick against the crate. It's hard to tell if he's joking. You pour another round. You add a pinch of ginger to one, just to break the rhythm. The student ruins another poem. The girl sighs, drinks, and pretends to read the stars. Your hands work automatically, but your mind's wandering now, tracing hidden tunnels, unreadable symbols, crescent moons carved in stone. You wonder how many secrets this city holds beneath its coffee grounds. One more customer. One more pour. And just as the call to afternoon prayer rises above the rooftops, you find yourself staring at the parchment again, heart tapping out a rhythm your hands can't explain. You don't read the parchment. Not yet. You tell yourself it's because you're too busy, that your stall needs your attention, that the phone won't swirl itself. But really, it's because you're not ready for whatever strange door it might open. And besides, lunch hour in the bazaar waits for no mystic prophecy. So you shift gears. You pull the stool closer. Wipe down the brazier's rim. Brush off the coffee grounds clinging to your sash like loyal but filthy pets. Your body aches in all the familiar ways, back, wrists, the exact spot between your shoulders that seems to hum every time you lean over a seize too long. But you press on, because lunchtime means a very different crowd, and they're not patient. Here come the bureaucrats. 2 men in robes dyed the exact shade of importance. One has a ledger under his arm, the other has a voice so nasal it could pierce marble. They're regulars, always arguing, always correcting each other on tax code interpretations, and always requesting their coffee like the treasury, bitter but precise. You oblige. No sugar. Foam neat. Cups placed without clank or spill. They continue their daily dance. One insists that the rice tax in the western provinces is unjust. The other insists he doesn't care as long as the receipts are legible. You have no idea who's right, but you're impressed by how much rage they can squeeze into sentences about parchment weight and seal wax color. Next comes the olive seller, grinning, noisy, smelling like brine and garlic. He always brings his own bread and dips it into the coffee. Yes, it's disgusting. No, you've never stopped him. Mostly because he also brings gossip. Today's installment, a pigeon flew into the Sultan's study. Refused to leave. Just sat there on the map of Venice. Symbolic, you ask. Or ill-trained, he says, tearing bread. Historians will argue. One of your phone critics returns. A large man, red-cheeked, prone to using metaphors that don't quite land. He says your coffee today is as firm as a janissary's handshake. You're not sure that's good, but he tips generously, so you accept it as praise. You pause to drink water, warm, slightly metallic from the brass flask you always forget to clean, and glance around your corner of the empire. People are lounging now, no longer rushed. The scent of grilled meat wafts in from somewhere you can't see, and your stomach grumbles like an old mule. You pull a cloth-wrapped bundle from your satchel, olives, dates, a heel of yesterday's bread. You eat slowly, between pores. A bite here, a sip there. It's not glamorous, but it's familiar. The kind of lunch you don't taste anymore because it's become part of the work. Midway through a date pit, someone clears their throat. You look up. A woman. Middle-aged, dressed plainly but precisely. She places 2 coins down and says, "One for me. One for the man with no sandals." You follow her nod. He's sitting across the way, silent, sunburned, with a face carved by years. You hadn't noticed him. She did. You pour. The foam is perfect. You deliver both cups without ceremony. She nods once. He says nothing but raises the cup like a salute. You nod back. Fringe fact to stir into your internal monologue. In some Ottoman districts, coffee vendors were known to serve the poor without charge, relying on wealthier patrons to sponsor them. Some vendors kept a tally, some just trusted their luck. Historians still argue whether this was charity, reputation management, or both. Your poet returns for a third round. He sits down with a very young man who wears the robe of a medical student and the expression of someone drowning in deadlines. They debate humors and moon cycles. One says melancholia is caused by bird bile. The other says it's probably just marriage. You decide not to interrupt. A small boy brings you a letter. No name, no return address. Just your name on the outside. Inside, a single line. Meet at the hammam at sundown. Bring the stone. You look around, instinctively. No one's watching. Or if they are, they're doing it better than you are. You tuck the note away. You are now officially part of a subplot you didn't ask for, possibly involving palace secrets, forbidden fountains, and dervishes who whisper like ghosts. Back to coffee. A spice trader from Aleppo drops by. He always smells like pepper and regret. He tries to trade cinnamon for credit. You agree, mostly because his cinnamon is excellent and he once saved your brazier from rolling into the Bosphorus. The sun tilts. Shadows stretch. Lunch hour fades. But the city never quite slows down. It just changes speed. You wipe your brow. Pour another cup. Listen as the ledger men resume arguing, now about whether dried figs should count as taxable luxury. You don't weigh in. But silently, you side with the figs. The afternoon hits like a slow, smothering blanket. Gone is the bright bustle of noon. In its place creeps a syrupy heat that coats your skin and dulls your senses. The air becomes heavy, not unbearable, just dense, like it's tired of moving. Even the flies seem sluggish, circling low over pastry crumbs with the resigned energy of bureaucrats waiting for a stamp. You fan the embers in your brazier, but they barely respond. The heat outside is beginning to match the heat inside, and now they're arguing over who gets to roast you faster. You roll your sleeves. Adjust your awning. Pour a cup with exaggerated slowness. This is the hour of quarrels. It starts, as it often does, with a theological disagreement. A bearded man in yellow robes starts citing Ibn Sina. Another interrupts to insist that Al-Ghazali had it right. A third says they're both missing the point and that coffee, not God, is the closest thing to perfection. That earns him a half-hearted laugh and a small date pit hurled at his cup. You stay out of it. The last time you took sides in a theological spat, someone brought up astrology, and your stall nearly turned into a courtroom. Instead, you do what coffee vendors do best. You stir and listen. The poet, still holding court, adds fuel to the fire with a casual, "Well, God gave us minds to argue, didn't he?" A fringe detail floats to mind. Some 16th-century Ottomans believed that too much coffee could overheat the brain, making men argumentative and emotionally unstable. Historians still argue whether this was legitimate medical theory or an early attempt to ban the world's most delicious dessert. You look over at the rival. He's suffering. His coals are burning unevenly, the sun has shifted to stab directly into his eyes, and his new apprentice is attempting to clean cups using a rag that looks suspiciously like a sock. His foam is inconsistent. His smile, strained. You try not to enjoy it. You fail. But even your own corner isn't immune to tension. The backgammon men have now turned to debating if the Sultan is being too lenient with foreign envoys. The perfume woman mutters something about weak leadership and gets a glare from one of the bureaucrats. A child bursts into tears because someone said the mosque cat isn't a real saint. You offer him a sugar cube. It helps. The flies, undeterred by politics, descend upon a bowl of syrup pastries someone left too close to your tray. You bat them away with your spoon, muttering curses old enough to qualify as folklore. And then something shifts. A tall man, new, well-dressed, clean beard, eyes like measuring scales, steps into your shadow. You don't recognize him, and that's what bothers you. Because in a city like this, the most dangerous people are the ones who aren't part of any story you've heard. He orders a coffee. Sweet. No spice. With a second cup, identical. He doesn't drink it. Instead, he sets the second cup on the stone ledge near your stall and walks away. A moment later, a boy, maybe 12, sits down and drinks from that second cup like he's done it before. Like he knows it's his. You've just witnessed a silent meeting. The kind that says more in the way the cups were placed than any whisper could. You don't comment. You just clean your spoon. A customer complains her coffee is too hot. You nod politely. She says it again, like it's your fault the laws of thermodynamics haven't adapted to her tongue. You add a splash of cold water, which she accepts as if you've performed a sacred rite. Next, a beardless scholar begins quoting ancient Egyptian texts as proof that coffee was mentioned in hieroglyphs. The poet laughs so hard he spills his drink. The grammar lady returns just to correct the conjugation of a proverb written on your menu board. It's chalk on wood. There's no board. She still corrects it. Then the dervish returns. Just one this time. The same one who handed you the stone. He doesn't speak. He just nods at the folded parchment still in your sash. You resist the urge to ask. Instead, you pour him a cup, no sugar, like before, and he drinks it while staring at your brazier like it's a miniature universe. When he finishes, he sets the cup upside down. You flip it, just slightly. Inside, where the grounds have clung to the curve of the porcelain, a strange symbol has formed. Not the one on the stone. A new one. An eye, maybe. Or a leaf. Or both. You glance up. The dervish is gone. You decide, finally, that it might be time to read the note. But just as you pull it out, a shadow falls over your stall again. Janissaries. 3 this time. Off duty, judging by the relaxed posture and the way one is already chewing on a fig like it owes him money. They don't talk at first. They just sit. You pour automatically. These men like it strong and sweet. Fast. No chatter. And no foam too pretty, it makes them uncomfortable. The biggest one grunts. You hear about the hammam fire last week? You freeze. You shake your head. He nods. Happened in the servant quarters. Smelled like burnt wool and saffron. Another adds, rumor is someone was looking for a door that doesn't exist. You stare at the parchment in your hand. You don't open it. Not yet. Instead, you pour another round. Stir. Serve. And wonder what happens when the sun finally sets. The sun dips low now, burning gold into the minaret tips and casting long, stretched shadows down your alley like lazy ghosts returning home. This hour, this warm orange, pre-dusk sliver of time, is fragile. It lingers just enough to lull you into comfort, then disappears the moment you let your guard down. But your guard is very much up. The janissaries are gone. They left as silently as they came, leaving only fig crumbs and unease. The boy who drank the second cup earlier is still hovering nearby, pretending to play with a stick while eyeing every passerby like he's tracking chess pieces on a moving board. The parchment note presses against your hip, and the hammam appointment looms. You try to focus on the coffee, on the pour, the grind, the temperature, but your rhythm's off. Your says boils too fast. The foam merely collapses. One cup comes out too light. Another customer says, tastes different today. You mumble something about a new roast, but your heart isn't in it. Your regulars notice. The poet raises an eyebrow as he sips. What troubles the throne, he says with a smirk, referring to your crate. You shake your head. Just thinking about debts. Physical or spiritual, he asks. Mostly the ones that come folded in parchment, you reply. He whistles low, then goes quiet. The backgammon players have moved to arguing over whether Venetian glass is better than Persian pottery. The woman with the ink-stained fingers is gone. The grammar expert has left to, presumably, lecture someone else's signage. And then, he appears again. The rival. He saunters over like he didn't lose 3 customers to underfoamed cups this afternoon. Like he wasn't publicly rebuked by a janissary for blocking a prayer path. He smiles, drops a single coin into your tip cup, and says, "Slow day?" You match his smile. Not slow. Just precise. He glances at your parchment. Deliveries now? You don't answer. He walks off, smiling. You pack up early. Not because business is done, it never really is, but because you need time to prepare. You snuff the brazier gently, letting the coals sigh into ash. You wipe each sieve with care, tucking them into your satchel as if they were family heirlooms. You gather your cups, your spoons, your bundle of half-eaten lunch, and sling it all over your shoulder. Then you wait. You time your exit so that the crowd swells and you can vanish into it. The Grand Bazaar breathes like a great beast. Inhale, people push in, swirl, haggle, exhale, they leave, lighter of coin and heavier of rumor. You drift. Down a side street. Past a lampmaker who's already lit his wares. Past the weaver who swears her dyes are made with pomegranate skin and divine favor. Past cats, always cats, one of which paces beside you for nearly an entire block like a silent escort. The hammam sits near the edge of a quieter quarter. Not the palace one, too well guarded. Not the public bath near the docks, too crowded. This one's modest, hidden behind a crumbling wall covered in ivy and crooked tiles. You only know it because you once brought coffee here for a steward who tipped in pepper. You knock once. The door creaks open with no one behind it. Of course. Inside, it's dim. Steam curls in corners like forgotten thoughts. The air smells of soap, wet stone, and something deeper, copper. Mold? No, incense. Old, faint, burned earlier today. You pass empty changing rooms. No voices. Only the drip of distant water and the soft lap of your sandals on slick marble. Then you hear it. Whispered chanting. Familiar syllables. Dervish cadences. You follow. Through a tiled corridor into a chamber lit only by a single lamp suspended over the center of the room. There, seated in a circle on warm stone, are 5 figures. The one closest to you gestures for silence. He's not surprised you're here. You remove your satchel slowly. You don't sit. He holds out a hand. You place the stone in it. He examines it, nods, and produces another. This one etched with the same crescent, but inside the crescent, the 3 dots have been filled in. You feel like you're watching someone correct a word mid-calligraphy. Then, finally, the one with the voice like water says, "Did you read the note?" You shake your head. You pull it out. You unfold it. It reads, "There is a place beneath the cistern where the walls hum. Do not open it alone." You look up, heart suddenly too big for your ribs. They nod, as if you've passed a test you didn't realize you were taking. "You'll know when," the voice says. And then he hands the stone back. "Why?" He doesn't say. They all rise. Disperse. No exit scene. Just gone. You're left alone, holding a stone that feels warmer now. Or maybe you're colder. Hard to tell. You walk home in silence. The city is different after sunset. Quieter. More honest. The stones echo. The wind picks up forgotten gossip and swirls it around your ankles. You pass a man reciting scripture to himself. A girl feeding pigeons with deliberate joy. 2 guards sharing a joke, their swords tilted carelessly like they trust the night. You reach your room. Set down your satchel. Unfold your mat. And for the first time in years, you pray aloud, not out of obligation, but out of confusion. Then, as you blow out your lamp, you place the stone on your windowsill. Let the moon find it. Let it begin, whatever it is. The morning after is silent in that eerie, anticipatory way, the kind of hush that wraps around the city like a wet blanket right before the drums roll. You're up early, but not for coffee. Not yet. The stone on your windowsill catches the first light. It hasn't changed, at least not visibly, but it feels heavier in your palm, like it's absorbed something overnight. Meaning, maybe. Or expectation. You press it into your sash and step outside. The air smells different today. Not worse, not better. Just different. There's a stillness in the alleys, like the pigeons forgot to show up for work. Even the cats give you sideways looks and scamper off faster than usual. You walk with more purpose than usual, past your usual landmarks, but not to your usual corner. No, today begins at the cistern. You've never been inside. Sure, you've heard stories. Tourists shuffle through it during festival months. Children dare each other to throw pebbles into the dark waters beneath the platforms. But for locals like you, the cistern is something you talk about more than visit. It's too old, too damp, too full of secrets that don't concern coffee vendors. Until now. You make your way toward the ancient basilica-turned-cistern entrance, blending in with a small line of vendors carrying morning deliveries, flour, linens, brass fittings, one guy with an alarming number of geese. No one stops you. You nod. Smile. Stay forgettable. At the edge of the plaza, you slip down a side stair, duck beneath a rusted gate, and find yourself in a place that smells like the inside of an old shoe and echoes like the bottom of a drum. The underground world of columns and shadows opens before you. Your sandals slap softly against damp stone. Your breath joins the gentle drip, drip, drip of water somewhere far ahead. The sound of the city above vanishes. You're not part of that anymore. The note said, where the walls hum. You listen. You walk. You turn once. Twice. Down a narrow corridor that hasn't seen a torch in years. And then, there it is. Not a hum, exactly. More like a vibration. Faint. Low. Like the rumble of an old voice caught in stone. You run your hand along the wall. Cold. Slick. And there, just visible in the green-tinted light, a symbol. The crescent. And 3 dots. You press the stone into the center. Nothing happens. Then, click. A door you didn't even see size open. And there, crouched and waiting like he knew, is the boy. The same one from your stall. The one who drank the second cup. He's not surprised to see you. He nods once and gestures for silence. Inside, the room is dry, quiet, smaller than you expected. Scrolls, half-rotted rugs, and in the center, what looks like an old merchant's chest. Locked, but not in the usual way. No latch. No keyhole. Just another engraving. The same symbol, but this time, it's open. The crescent points downward. He gestures again. You reach for your stone, but the boy holds up a hand. Instead, he pulls something from his sleeve, a bone-white sliver, shaped like a stylus. He inserts it. The chest clicks. And from inside, he pulls parchment. Old, brittle, sealed with wax and bound in twine the color of ash. He doesn't open it. He just hands it to you. You hesitate. He says, "You're not the messenger." Then adds, "You're the stall." Which somehow makes even less sense. Until you remember the poet calling your corner a republic. A court. A stage. Maybe even a lighthouse. You don't ask more. You just nod. The boy disappears. Just like that. A shimmer, a shuffle, a turn, and he's gone into the shadows like a cat with an urgent secret. You re-emerge just after sunrise. The light feels loud now. Harsh. The smells, onions, fish, spice, sweat, slam into your senses like drummers who overslept. You shake it off. Return to your corner. Set up your brazier. The first customers trickle in. The usuals. The poet. The olive man. The girl with the unimpressed glare. You pour. You serve. You tuck the sealed parchment under your crate. Because now, you're not just a vendor. You're something else. A keeper. A hinge. A stall, yes, but also the axis around which a few quiet truths will turn. Historians still argue whether the coffee vendors of the Ottoman Empire were merely servants of the street, or the unofficial archivists of the soul. You stir your seive. You think, probably both. Even with the mysterious parchment snug beneath your crate like a sleeping secret, the show must go on. Because customers don't care if you just unlocked an ancient door under the cistern, they care about foam, and whether it reaches the rim of the cup like it's supposed to. So you keep pouring. And today, your pour is on point. Maybe it's the adrenaline. Maybe it's the faint hum of responsibility now thrumming under your skin. But your hands move like they've known the shape of these says since birth. The first few cups are flawless. Even the grammar woman doesn't find fault, and she's the type to correct steam patterns. Then comes the unexpected. A voice cuts through the morning din. A strong, theatrical one, like a merchant auctioning carpets but with more vowels. You glance up. A storyteller. Not just any. The storyteller. You've heard of this man. He's been called the tongue of 2 continents. He's performed before pashas in palace courtyards. And now he's here, brushing dust from his robe like he owns the alley. He doesn't ask. He sits. He drinks. He turns to the gathering regulars and says, "Shall we begin?" And just like that, you're no longer a vendor. You're a stage. People settle around your corner like birds onto a favored rooftop. Crates are flipped. Shawls are laid. Even the janissary from yesterday's fig incident returns and sits, arms folded, eyebrow raised. The storyteller begins. It's a tale of love, betrayal, and a merchant who swallowed a cursed pearl. The man changes voices like cups, soft for lovers, hard for villains, wild for spirits. You serve as he speaks, your says hissing in time with his plot twists. But then, another voice rises. Calmer, colder. A woman, wrapped in a black shawl. Her face is shaded, her tone sharp. That's not how the tale ends, she says. The crowd turns. A challenger. You brace yourself. Story duels are rare, but when they happen, they happen. The rules are unspoken but clear, no scripts, no interruptions, and the first to bore the crowd loses their right to finish. He grins. Then enlighten us. She does. She picks up where he left off, but shifts the tone. In her version, the merchant wasn't cursed, he was warned. And the betrayal wasn't romantic, it was political. The pearl? A metaphor for justice choked down in silence. The crowd gasps. The poet clasps his chest like he's been stabbed by truth. Someone's olive rolls away, forgotten. Then the man returns serve. Back and forth they go, weaving a tapestry of suspense and delight, pulling on threads of folklore and rumor until no one knows what's real and what's brilliant invention. You've never seen anything like it. You serve 2 more rounds during a breathless pause. No one notices. The rival shows up. Too late. He tries to smile, offer a sample, but no one moves. His brazier sits cold while your fire glows steady. He watches the duel, then fades into the crowd, forgotten. You make a note to send him a cup later. Out of pity. Or respect. Or both. The story duel hits its peak. She speaks of a moonlit vow under an almond tree. He counters with a betrayal staged during prayer. She says the merchant buried the pearl to escape fate. He ends with the sea giving it back, cracked, glowing, still curse. Silence. Then applause, loud, long, layered. Coins are thrown. Flowers appear from nowhere. Someone sobs quietly into a fig pastry. They both bow. No declared winner. Just the kind of ending that says, you'll think about this for days. Fringe tidbit for your internal archives. Ottoman coffeehouses were sometimes referred to as schools of the wise. Not because degrees were earned, but because minds were sharpened. Historians still argue whether these storytelling duels were spontaneous or planned, but no one denies their power to unite, provoke, and enchant. The 2 storytellers share a final cup. He thanks you with a nod. She presses something into your hand, a scrap of parchment with a line of poetry in a dialect you don't recognize. You tuck it next to the sealed scroll. The crowd slowly disperses, whispering theories and quoting lines. Someone tries to retell the story already, gets it wrong, and is gently corrected. The poet approaches. That, he says, was what we call a storm of silk. You nod. Then he adds, and yet, you haven't read your own scroll. You reply, I pour the stories. I don't always need to read them. He smiles. Maybe. But some stories pour you. He walks away. You refill your water. Rake the coals. Breathe. Because today, you didn't just host a duel. You hosted history. And history, you've learned, tastes best when served with foam. The final light of day hits your stall like a soft warning, gentle, golden, and full of meaning. This is when the real quiet begins, not because people stop talking, but because they start remembering what they haven't said. You know this hour well. It's the hour of aching feet. The brazier's flame dies low, embers sighing their last breath. Yours says sit empty, coated with the crusty edge of dried foam. The cups, once a parade of porcelain glory, are now stacked, stained, and waiting for your cracked fingers to make them shine again. Cleanup begins. You start with the big things. The brazier's coals are dumped into the sand bucket with a hiss like a serpent swallowing. The tray is wiped with the least offensive corner of your cleaning cloth. You pick crumbs from the crevices with a skewer. The sound of the city dims just a little. Not asleep, but yawning. You rinse each cup one at a time, using a jug of lukewarm water and a rhythm you've practiced since before your beard turned patchy. The foam rings are stubborn today. Maybe the storytelling duel infused them with drama. You scrape, rinse, wipe, stack. Your knees pop when you stand. Your back sends a slow, sarcastic pulse down your spine. You pretend not to hear it. A customer returns a cup you didn't notice was missing. Sorry, she says. I just didn't want the story to end. You nod, take the cup, and add it to the pile like another chapter. Then you count the coins. It's a ritual, too. Not just about the money, though it matters, but about the feel of bronze and silver under your fingertips. Some are warm from pockets. Others still smell faintly of cloves or fish. A few have tiny notches, as if bitten in suspicion. Today's total? Better than expected. A few mystery coins, too, one marked with a stamp you don't recognize. You pocket it. Add it to the collection of questions beneath your crate. You stretch again, this time slower. A cat appears, as if summoned by the sound of copper. It meows, blinks slowly, and curls near your crate like it's entitled to rent-free lodging. You toss it a date pit. It looks unimpressed. The olive vendor walks by, waving. Still here? He chuckles. Still foamed, you reply. You said that so many times, it might as well be your family crest. A breeze kicks up, carrying the scent of lamp oil and baked earth. Somewhere, someone is frying onions. Somewhere else, a flute winds a lonely tune. You feel the weight of the scroll again. Not in your hand, in your mind. You haven't opened it. Still, you crouch beside your crate, brush away some dust, and pull it out. You study the wax. It hasn't cracked. The seal is firm. The twine, tight. Your fingers hover. But not yet. Not tonight. Instead, you place it carefully into the small wooden box you use for spoons, close the lid, and lock it with a bit of cloth. Let it wait. Let the mystery steep a little longer. And then, your final act of the day, you wipe your hands on your apron, nod to the cat, and blow out the lantern. Darkness doesn't fall. It exhales. You lift your satchel. Sling it over your shoulder. Each item in its place. Each cup upside down. Each spoon counted. Your knees complain again. Your toes throb. But you smile. Because you made it. Not just through the work, but through the stories, the riddles, the secrets, the duels, the warnings. You were a stall. You were a court. You were a page in a book no one dares to write. And tomorrow? You'll do it all again, with fresh beans and maybe a sharper sense of who exactly you are. You don't walk home. You float. It's a kind of drift that only comes after a full day of carrying too much weight, literal, emotional, possibly cosmic. Your satchel is lighter now, but your mind isn't. Not after everything. Not after secret doors and stone keys and poetry duels and that unread scroll resting like a tiny sultan beneath your spoons. The streets are quieter than usual. The lanterns glow like sleepy eyes half closed. The echoes of your sandals tap against the stone, each step a soft footnote on the city's fading day. This is the version of Constantinople you like best. The whispering version, where the chaos of market and flame gives way to the lullaby of distant prayers and the slow clink of bakers cleaning up for the night. Somewhere, someone is still debating something, probably tax law or why dates are better than figs, but most of the city has surrendered. You pass the hammam again. Closed. Silent. You don't even glance at the door. The memory of that underground chamber still hums in your bones. Like a low song you can't quite remember but can't stop hearing. You pause beneath a lamplight. Lean against a wall. Let your eyes close for just a moment. That's when you hear the cough. Old. Familiar. You turn your head slowly, and there he is, your rival. Seated on the low steps of a mosque, one hand rubbing his knee, the other holding a mostly empty cup. He nods at you. You nod back. Neither of you speaks. Because what's left to say? You both saw the same crowd today. You both heard the applause. You both know who says held the longest foam. And yet, somehow, you both made it through. That's the truth no one claps for. He raises his cup, then finishes the last sip like it's medicine. Stall's yours tomorrow, he says. I'm heading to Edirne. You raise an eyebrow. Just for a week, he adds. Family. You nod again. You don't ask questions. Rivals or not, there's an understanding. Coffee vendors don't interrogate each other after dark. That's the first rule they never write down. As you part ways, he tosses you something, a coin. You catch it. It's not currency. It's a token. A tiny brass disc, worn smooth, stamped with the symbol of a sesv and a rising sun. You've seen these. A rare few vendors carry them. They're part reputation, part superstition. They say if you carry one, the fire never dies and the foam always holds. You nod in thanks. He disappears down a side street. You keep walking. By now, the wind has picked up. Not sharp, just enough to move a veil. Enough to sway a lantern on its hook. You pass shuttered stalls, their colorful fabrics tied down tight. You pass a cat grooming itself on a rooftop, perfectly disinterested in the affairs of men. Then you hear singing. Soft, not far. A woman's voice. Lullaby or prayer. It floats down from an open window and rests on your shoulder like warm silk. You don't understand the words. You don't need to. You pause outside a familiar door. Your door. The wood is cracked, the latch a little loose, but it's yours. The room beyond it? Small, uneven floored, always a little colder than it should be, but filled with the scent of old beans and quiet comfort. You step inside. Set the satchel down. Remove your sash. Unwrap the coin. The scroll. The scrap of poetry from the storyteller. You arrange them like relics. Then you light a single lamp and sit. There's no need for ceremony. No tea. No music. Just your breath and the quiet crackle of oil burning low. You open the poetry scrap first. 3 lines. A riddle. Or maybe a reminder. Whiz bitter, served in fire. But cools the storm and lifts the lyre. Sip it slow, it might conspire. You smile. Then you look at the scroll again. Still sealed. Still waiting. And once more, you let it wait. You lean back. Rest your head. Close your eyes. The day has folded itself up neatly, like a napkin at the end of a grand meal. Your role was simple. Essential. Humble. And today, you played it well. No one saw the real weight you carried. But you did. You lived it. Foam and fire, secrets and stories. And now, finally, you allow yourself the luxury of stillness. Morning breaks with a kindness it rarely shows. No sharp light. No shouting carts. Just the hush of a city still asleep, and the breeze slipping in through your cracked window like it forgot something last night. You wake slowly, but not groggily. There's no rush today. Or rather, the rush hasn't found you yet. The scroll still sits where you left it. Untouched. Watching. You nod at it, like 2 old men sharing the same bench. It doesn't insist. Neither do you. You wash your face with cool water from a chipped basin, wrap your sash with practiced hands, and gather your tools. The scissors. The cups. The worn cloth that used to be blue. The stone is still in your pocket, warm now, like it remembers. You walk through streets that are just beginning to stir. Laundry flutters from windows. A boy yawns while carrying bread on his head. A cat sprints past with a stolen fig, pursued by nothing but its own arrogance. Your corner is waiting. You set up quietly. The crate still wobbles. The brazier still needs sweet talking before it lights properly. And your first grind of the day, slow, rhythmic, steady, feels more like a meditation than labor. You brew for yourself first. A rare luxury. You pour slowly. No sugar. No spice. Just thick, honest coffee with a foam so perfect it almost feels like a wink. The first sip is bitter, deep, grounding. And then the world arrives. The poet, wrapped in a too-thin shawl, muttering about a dream involving a flaming pigeon. The backgammon duo, now in the middle of a silent treatment turned performance art. The fig thief, proudly showing off a juice-stained sleeve. You welcome them all. Because you were not just serving coffee. You are welcoming the city back to itself. More cups. More foam. A new woman appears, young, soft-spoken, clutching a scroll case that looks suspiciously old. She sits quietly, listens. Doesn't drink. A man tries to argue about tulip prices. You deflect him with cinnamon and kindness. A janissary nods at you. You nod back. No words exchanged, but a mutual agreement. The story continues. You pause between rounds. Wipe your hands. Reach beneath your crate for the scroll. You bring it out, but you still don't open it. Because maybe some stories work better when they remain steeping, just a little longer. Maybe you're not the reader. Maybe you're the witness. The custodian. Maybe you're the one who pours, listens, remembers. A fringe thought floats up. Some say the truest power in the empire was never in the palace, but in the corners. In the places where truth was spoken with foam, and history passed from lip to lip without ever needing ink. Historians still argue about that. Let them. You adjust your sash. Pour another cup. The day continues. Your stall hums. And in a city bursting with secrets, you are still the one who gets to taste them first. Word count, 1064. Wind down, 300 words. So now, take a breath. Let the fire from the brazier fade gently in your mind, until all you can see are the quiet coils of smoke curling into a sky that's finally turning soft with night. Picture your stall again, cups stacked neatly, the coals cooling to embers, the poet dozing off mid-sentence, and the cat stretching in that last patch of sun like it owns the empire. You've lived a full day in a city of empires and echoes. You've stood in shadowed courtyards, poured truth into porcelain, and stirred more than just coffee. And through it all, through gossip and gold coins, secrets and stories, dervishes and duelists, you kept your hands steady. Maybe that's what this was all about. Not solving a mystery, not unlocking a scroll, but staying still, staying kind, and staying curious long enough to notice what everyone else missed. Because that's what a coffee vendor does. They don't just serve a drink. They host 1,000 lives, in sips and silence and the warm weight of a cup passed from hand to hand. So now, settle under your own blanket. Let the city of Constantinople drift into mist. Let the foam rise one last time, in your memory. And if, tomorrow, you wake up feeling a little heavier, maybe it's not burden. Maybe it's meaning. Now sleep well, dream of crescents and copper, and we'll meet again in the next tale.